Hello everyone, my name is Salar. You're watching Smart Code and learning JavaScript. Let's continue with the basics on the JavaScript. You see the data type list on the screen. We have thoroughly covered undefined number, null, and string data types. And so now the next data type on our list is the Boolean data type. So this tutorial is all about Boolean data type. And right after watching this tutorial, you will be working with Booleans confidently. So let's go ahead and study this data type. We are going to first look into the Boolean data type, like how do we create Boolean variables. And after that, we are going to learn Boolean function. This function is very important and it is used to convert a value into its Boolean equivalent. You can code and call this function if you want, otherwise it is automatically called by the if statements. Just follow this tutorial and you will learn everything that you need to know about the Boolean function. So the Boolean type is one of the most frequently used data type in programming because it is not only used by the programmers to define logics, but also it is used by many inbuilt functions and operators. For example, in our previous tutorial, when we performed string manipulation, we used a function named includes, and that function returns a true value if the search string is found. Otherwise, you get a false value. So the true and false are actually Boolean values. And similarly, the operators like logical operators and relational operators compare two values and return a Boolean value as a result, right? So the Boolean type is almost everywhere. And when you create Boolean variable, you use these two values. So let's create Boolean variables using the values true and false. That's it. It is so simple to create Boolean variables. All you need to do is just assign true or false, right? Both the variable types is now Boolean and you can confirm it using the type of operator. Let's print their type in the console. Right, so here you see the evidence. This is how we create Boolean variables, and like I said earlier, they are extremely useful. There are so many things in programming which are based on true and false. For example, if statements decide program flow based on Boolean values, true and false. And you as a programmer sometimes need a data type that can hold two different values or two different states, like true and false, yes and no, on and off, open and close, etc. So you will be using this variable quite a lot, and I will also continue working with it in our future tutorials. Let's now go ahead and learn the use of Boolean function. In JavaScript, every data type has its Boolean equivalent, true or false. And in order to get that equivalent, we use Boolean function. So don't get confused, right? Everything will be cleared when we write some examples. We are going to start with the string type and try to get its Boolean equivalent. I will define two string variables, one holding an object and the other one is empty. Right, so we have two string variables, str1 and str2. str2 is an empty string. And so now I'm going to apply a Boolean function to both the variables to get their Boolean equivalents. The first thing that I want you to notice here is how do we apply Boolean function. You just write the name of the function and pass variable as parameter. Now the second thing that I want you to notice here is the return value. In the first case, where the string is not empty, you will get a true. And that means Boolean equivalent of a non-empty string is always a true. And in the second case, we have an empty string. And Boolean equivalent of an empty string will always be false, right? You need to remember this rule. Boolean equivalent of a non-empty string is always true, otherwise false. And that is also what I meant when I said in the beginning that every data type has its Boolean equivalent. And here you just see the examples. Let's now find out the Boolean equivalents of the number type. And I need to create some variables. So let's do that. So we have three number type variables, num, 0, and nan. And these are the values 10, 0, and we are going to definitely get here a nan value. If you're unsure about the nan value, then I would recommend tutorial number 14. So we have already talked about the nan in our tutorial number 14. Now I'm going to apply a Boolean function to these variables to get their Boolean equivalence. And here comes the rule number 2 that you also need to remember. And it says if the number type's value is 0 or nan, you will always get false. And for other values, the result would always be true, right? I hope things are now started making sense. These rules are important to understand. In the last, I will show you how to practically implement these rules in the code, right? So the last data type that we are gonna check out is the object type, and we will try to find out its Boolean equivalence. Object data type is the next data type in our list, and we will be covering it in our next tutorial. So we need an object in the program, so let's create it. My object name is car, and it has two properties, a color property and a model property. So this car object is good and it is created successfully, and it has two properties, color and model. So when there is an object, the result of the Boolean function should be true. And that means the Boolean equivalent of the valid object is always true. But if the object is missing or can't be created for some reason, then the JavaScript assigns null value to the object variable. Let's suppose if this object creation goes wrong for some reason, then a null value is assigned to the car variable. Null value simply means real object is missing. And when the object is missing, Boolean function gonna return a false value. And this is the rule number 3 that you need to remember. So let's now sum up everything we talked about up till now. An empty string's Boolean equivalent is false, otherwise it is true. And if the number is 0 or nan, the Boolean equivalent is false, and for all other values it is true. And if there is an object, the Boolean equivalent is true. If object is missing, it is false, right? Let's now learn how do we use these Boolean equivalents to process variables. The Boolean function is automatically called by the if statements, and that means you can process your variables directly inside the if statements without including other operators. Let's try to understand with the help of some examples. I am creating a new variable in the program. Now I can easily put this variable in the if statement to find out if it is empty or not. So here you see the example. I don't want to process an empty string, so I put the string variable directly in the if statement. And here the Boolean function is automatically called. And we know the Boolean equivalent of a non-empty string is true. So you will get a true here because our string is not empty, it has an object. And you will come inside the if block where you can process your string, right? So things are now easy. Alternatively, you can write an if statement like this. Right? So both are exactly the same. Similarly, if you have a number variable and you don't want to process 0 or nan value, then you can write an if statement like this. Right? So the Boolean function is called here automatically and it will return a true. And alternatively, you can write an if statement like this. Right? So both are exactly the same. And the same way, you can easily find out if there is an object or not. You just need to put your object variable in the if statement like this. So now you have seen and learned how to work with Boolean data type and Boolean function. And I hope you like this tutorial. In our next tutorial, we are going to cover object data type, very important data type in JavaScript. I will see you there. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.